children pulled their money out of their sick mother, and after getting the news of her death, they rushed to her house for the inheritance, but almost collapsed next to her when they found out. Miranda Barnes came up to the window and opened the curtains, exclaiming in surprise, "Wow, there's so much snow outside. The kids are going to have so much fun." After enjoying the beautiful winter landscape, Mrs. Barnes poured herself some tea and set about waiting for the arrival of Emma Parker, who visited the old lady almost every morning, as she was her only friend. They had known each other for many years and treated each other with respect and care. But the two women weren't only connected by their friendship. Emma Parker was in charge of the orphanage, which Mrs. Barnes took under her wing many years ago. She wasn't a frail old lady at the time, and together with her husband, they managed a farm. Moreover, the motivated couple were very good at it, which was confirmed by the stable increase in the supply of their agricultural products to all the regions of the country. In a few sweaty years of grueling labor, the Barnes couple transformed a local farm in Wyoming into a thriving business that provided hundreds of jobs for the community. Time flew by, turning the couple into real professionals in their field. Unfortunately, Harry Barnes passed away, leaving his beloved wife a widow several days before their 40th wedding anniversary. During the years of their marriage, the happy couple didn't only successfully build their farm business, but also gave birth to 3 beautiful children, a daughter Monica, and 2 sons, Richard and Michael. Unfortunately, with the exception of the oldest son, Richard, none of the children followed in their parents' footsteps and didn't take up farming. Monica, for example, was more attracted to beauty salons and shopping, while Michael's passion was long-distance travel and tourism. It is worth noting that the eldest son, Richard, also wasn't very successful at farming, and if not for the help of the faithful and loyal manager, Samuel, he would certainly have ruined the family business of his parents. And Mrs. Barnes retired 3 years ago due to her age and was now living a lonely life in a 2-story house that they built together with her beloved husband. She ran the household herself and never asked her children for any help, preferring not to distract them from their important lives. A loud knock at the door pulled Mrs. Barnes out of her sad thoughts. She smiled and opened the door to see Emma Parker standing at the porch. "Come on in, honey. I've been waiting for you." "But I get why you're so late, looking at all this snow," said the old woman, and hurried to the kitchen to pour tea for her guest. "Oh, don't even get me started. According to the forecasters, the snowfall will last 3 more days, but the kids at the orphanage are very happy. They are making snowmen and will go sledding," Emma replied, rubbing her cheeks red from the cold with their hands. Mrs. Barnes patiently waited for the guests to warm up and come to her senses, and then asked, "So, tell me, dear, how are things at the orphanage? Is everything working out? I know you didn't just come to say hello. You're going to ask me for money. So tell me, am I wrong?" "That's what I thought. There's no hiding anything from you, Mrs. Barnes. We need to buy fresh fruit for the kids, and some juices would be good. It's winter after all. They need vitamins," Emma Parker replied, looking Mrs. Barnes straight in the eyes. I know. That's all right, honey. What would I be doing without you and Samuel? You've always been very helpful, and I know I can count on you two in case something happens, unlike my children who only care about having fun," the elderly woman said with a sad sigh. Emma Parker lowered her eyes in understanding and then touched the woman's hand, trying to cheer her up. "Mrs. Barnes, I understand that this is, of course, none of my business, but it seems to me that your children are wrong," the head of the orphanage remarked in an insinuating voice. "But what can I do about it now? They've already grown up like that. I can't change the way they are," the old woman answered with a sigh. "You may not be able to change them, but you could still awaken their conscience and push them towards the right path. But to do it, you'd have to add a little acting and drama," Emma Parker said with a mysterious smile. Mrs. Barnes looked inquiringly at the woman, who took a pause and then came up with an interesting idea. As Emma was explaining what she had in mind, the old woman's face kept going through all kinds of different emotions. Finally, after hearing Emma out, the old woman smiled and said, "Well, dear, it's a good idea. Maybe it will even work." Then the woman changed the subject for the conversation and didn't return to it again. And the next morning, Mrs. Barnes felt unwell and had a strange burning sensation in her left breast. Barely managing to reach the phone, the woman called the ambulance with a trembling hand and lost consciousness. Fortunately, thanks to the professional paramedics and their timely assistance, The unfortunate old lady survived. "You're one lucky woman, Mrs. Barnes. You had a heart attack that could have killed you," said the doctor, carefully examining the test results of the old woman. Mrs. Barnes smiled wryly and then closed her eyes, resting. Upon learning of the misfortune that befell her friend, Emma Parker immediately notified her children and Samuel, who ran the old woman's farm. Unfortunately, Emma's fears were justified and no one came to visit Mrs. Barnes at the hospital. Samuel had urgent business in the neighboring state. Richard was busy divorcing his wife. Monica was at a music festival, and Michael was in Europe. But 2 days later, when Emma called all the relatives to let them know that Mrs. Barnes had passed away, all the children arrived at the house within 6 hours. Only Michael took longer. He really was on the other side of the Atlantic after all. Avoiding any eye contact, the young people gathered in the living room, wishing to find out who was in Mrs. Barnes's will and what they were getting. The fact was that they'd grown so accustomed to getting financial assistance from their mother that having lost it, they didn't know how to live on. A nervous atmosphere reigned in the living room, caused by the fighting of Mrs. Barnes's children, who got together for the first time in many years and seemed to have lost the ability to communicate with each other. Each of the heirs tried to get the attention of the others and believed that everyone wanted to deceive them and deprive them of their share of the inheritance. The situation escalated to the point where hardly anything could calm down the group of money-hungry heirs. At that moment, Emma Parker, who deliberately gathered everyone in the old woman's house, left the room and said, "Each of you can take your turn to come in and say goodbye to Mrs. Barnes before the funeral." That's when the children gave each other strange looks and, without saying a word, pushed Samuel forward. Feeling awkward and scared of the deceased, the manager opened the door and timidly walked inside. The lighting of the room was dimmed, and after the bright light of the living room, Samuel's eyes could hardly make out the outline of the body lying on the bed. The manager felt his eyes tear up and took a folded handkerchief out of his pocket. But before he even had the time to bring it to his face, a quiet voice spoke in the room. "You were always sentimental, Samuel. Don't be afraid. Come here and give me a hug." The manager shuddered, and then looking up, he saw Mrs. Barnes sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at him with an affectionate, motherly gaze. "What does it all mean? You didn't die? Have you been watching us this whole time?" Samuel began to stutter. "Of course I've been watching you. What did you think? Sorry for this performance, but I had to do something. You have nothing to be mad at me for. I taught you everything you know. And even now, when you're managing my family business, I still look after you. Yes, I know it all. You're a good man and a good employee. So I ask you to take care of my children, especially Richard. He dreams of becoming a businessman, but he needs someone to support him and give him advice. That's when you come in, my dear. Please, help him. Now, go tell Richard to come in, and don't let him in on our little secret," Mrs. Barnes said, giving the manager an affectionate smile. Having barely calmed down, Samuel nodded timidly and slowly left the room. When Richard saw his elderly mother miraculously raised from the dead, he almost fainted, mistaking everything he saw for a very realistic hallucination. "Don't be afraid, my boy. I know that you're very smart, but you lack confidence. Don't worry about it. You'll get more experienced with time. Samuel will help you. I want to ask you to take care of Monica. You know her. She's beautiful but windy. She only ever wants to have fun and go shopping. Look after her, be kind, and the Lord will reward you for your efforts." Mrs. Barnes gave another one of her speeches. When Richard left the room, his face showed concern and certain detachment. "What were you doing there for so long?" Monica asked, irritated, going into her mother's room. Mrs. Barnes had the right words prepared for her daughter as well, who was also a good person at heart. As with the previous visitors, the elderly woman first encouraged her daughter and then asked her to take care of her younger brother, Michael. "You are so smart and so beautiful. Take my word for it, you will definitely succeed in life. Just believe in yourself and never forget your family. You're all stronger together, and each of you is weak and helpless on your own. Don't ever forget it," the old woman added before Monica left the room. The last visitor was the youngest son, Michael, who had already figured out the old woman's plan. "Mom, I have to admit, at first it all looked real and convincing, but when you asked us all to come in one by one, I figured it out," Michael said with a smile. I always knew you were smart. That's because you're the youngest. Unfortunately, I paid too little attention to you, allowing Richard and Monica to raise you instead. Perhaps that's why you grew up so independent and opinionated. You weren't spoiled by money because you spent so much time traveling. But now it's time to settle down, son, and think about your family. That's why I'm asking you to take care of your older brother and sister. And don't forget about Samuel, my boy. He's a good man, but he could always use some help and a reliable friend. Wiping away her tears, Mrs. Barnes said. She was very emotional over everything that was going on. Of course, Mom. Don't worry about it. I won't let you down, the man whispered and hugged his mom's slender body. And when all the members of the Barnes family gathered again in the living room, the atmosphere was now very quiet and peaceful. Having had an honest conversation with their mother, the heirs no longer felt the need to try to figure out what share of the family wealth each of them would get. But as it turned out, the money actually belonged to all of them, and they could all use it as they see fit. So, when Emma Parker came into the room with a happy smile on her face and brought in a huge birthday cake, the young people were very happy. Here, I invite all of us to celebrate the miraculous resurrection of Mrs. Barnes and wish her many years of life, the woman added and put the treat on the table. Sealed by mutual responsibility and the promise to take care of each other, the children once again felt like one big happy family, which was ready to overcome all the hardships that may befall any one of them. Thus, thanks to the wise idea of Miranda Barnes, the whole family gathered together for the first time in several years, and it seemed that even the late father of the family was looking approvingly at them all from the photo on the wall.